Hey, what's up? This is Will Turpin from Collective Soul, and you're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com.
Hi, and welcome to ForBassPlayersOnly.com. I'm John Leapman, founder and first baseman. You know, a lot of people think they're too old or it's too late for them to learn how to play an instrument. So I created ForBassPlayersOnly.com for adults who want to learn bass, because I believe you're never too old and it's never too late to groove, to experience the joy and the pleasure of making music. For BassPlayersOnly.com, let's play bass. My guest this week is Will Turpin, who is the founding bass player of the band Collective Soul from way back in the early 90s, I guess. Will has also had a solo career as a frontman artist with releases such as The Lighthouse and Serengeti Drivers. He's collaborated with other artists in various capacities, including Abel, Rawls, and Hayes. And he is the owner now of Reel to Reel recording studios in Jonesboro, Georgia. Hi, Will, and welcome back.
Yeah, man, glad to be back, man. Thanks for getting me on again, man.
My pleasure. We did a phone interview, I don't know if you remember, on ForBassPlayersOnly.com. It was published on February 6th, 2012.
Yeah, it's crazy how the years go, because I remember, and I wouldn't have come close to guessing 11 years ago. It's like one of those things where when I was younger, everybody, the older generation, would always tell me how time flies. And I was like, time doesn't fly. There's 60 seconds in a minute. There's 60 minutes in an hour. It's all relative. It's all the same. And then now it's been 30 years with Collective Soul, and I'm 52 years old, and time has definitely flown. And it's hard to judge the difference between 7 years ago and 15 years ago. It's just all kind of part of my memory. And I would have guessed it was about 7-8 years ago, not 12.
Yeah. Well, so anything new since we last spoke? Tell me what's going on. What's keeping you busy these days?
Well, I mean, look, you mentioned I took ownership of my father's studio. He opened that place in 1976 in a small town south of Atlanta. And that's the hub. That's the place that Collective Soul came out of. I watched Ed, 7.5 years, my senior, be head engineer there and work on his craft as a songwriter. And basically, me and my friends kind of came up through high school, and Ed, we always knew each other. My earliest memories, I knew who Dean and Ed were because I was attending their father's church. We lived 2 streets over from each other. We've always known each other, and so the town was a big deal, but also without that studio there, I don't know. Yeah, there probably wouldn't be a Collective Soul. It was our hub, and it gave us. Ed likes to say it gave us the fertile ground, the soil, the fertilizer, and everything that we needed to do to learn the acumen of the studio and to learn. He taught us a lot about, even at a young age. When I look back, when I think about Collective Soul, like we had studio acumen. We were committed to the songs. We didn't care about who was the coolest. We weren't trying to chase anybody else's sound either. And we were always, and we still are today, always focused on what's next. We were always wanting, hey, thanks. We appreciate y'all like that first record, sold 1.5 million. It's cool. Y'all just wait. We got more. We got more. And that was always our attitude. We want to do more, and then just wait. We got more. We wanted to be given the chance to show people what we had. And we knew that would take a series of records, not just 1 or 2 records.
I definitely want to come back to that, but I'm thinking back to you must have been a little kid hanging around. Did your dad let you come in the studio, and did he show you stuff? Was he a musician? Did you have people coming in, bands coming in? What was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Again, part of the secret sauce in Collective Soul was being able to see all those different. I mean, I saw bluegrass, I saw Atlanta R&B, I saw rock and roll bands, I saw country bands, country rock bands in the 80s when country was kind of urban cowboy was the thing, and it was like country rock, and I watched some people, be better than others. And you just kind of soak it all in. I definitely tell this one story about, as far as, my dad, it was a ways to the means. He was a musician. He was signed to it. A band of his was signed to Atlantic Records in the early 70s, which is who we ended up signing to. You wouldn't know the name
Excuse me,
of the band.
what instrument did he play?
He was a bassist in that band, but he was also a multi-instrumentalist as well. But yeah, I can't remember where I was going telling you about.
You were going to tell me the name of the band. I didn't mean to interrupt.
The name of the band was Smoke Rise. You wouldn't have recognized it, but the name of the band was Smoke Rise. But yeah, the studio was a ways for him to record, man, and bunch of great bands he was in. Saturday Night Session was a really cool. I call it Stomp Grass. It was Stomp Grass before Stomp Grass was even a thing. They had a real drummer and a bluegrass band, and then Real People was a really, really good band in Atlanta area that, man, they were selling 500 tickets, to come see them as a regional act. And so it was a ways to a means for him to have the studio, but he was the kind of guy that would get a book, read it, and build a studio. He built an echo chamber modeled after one of Capitol Chambers' echo chambers, strictly DIY, let's get everybody together. Let's get all my friends that are musicians. Let's build a studio.
Before Google and YouTube and all that. So that must have been really challenging for him.
It was an interesting lifestyle. And I was my father's oldest son. I mean, the dining room table was never a dining room table. It was always a drafting board or, and yeah, and exactly in an era when you can't look it up on YouTube, he would get the book and he would get it done. And he ended up designing a bunch of other studios for other people. It became something that he was really, really good at.
The 70s, I'm picturing 2-inch tape and analog, everything, the old school, the old sound.
Yeah, he got a Trident board in the early 80s. He got a Trident board, and that was a big deal.
Yep, I remember those.
The studio now is in a location that was built in 2001. So it was built, the place that I own, reel to reel, it's still reel to reel, but it was built from the ground up to be a studio, where the original was in a basement in a home.
A lot of studios start out there. A lot of them stay there forever.
There's still plenty of them right now.
It's true.
There's still plenty around. But yeah, I just sold the 2-inch machine and the Trident board, and we were still barely using that 2-inch machine, but the space and the hassle. I got rid of the 2-inch machine and got rid of the Trident, and I've got 2 studios there, Studio A, Studio B, and they're both at the peak of technology today, and the workflow is amazing. And I switched out the Trident for an SSL Origins board, and it's been fun, man, to redo it and feel my father's spirit there, and know that he's definitely looking down, smiling as I'm putting life and putting some blood, sweat, and tears back into the studio. Man, it's a really great place.
How much of a challenge do you find owning a studio in this day and age, when so much, at least of the prep work, can be done, the programming and the maybe drum tracks or any tracks, bass tracks, guitar tracks? People still need a studio, but not quite in the same way as they did a generation or two ago. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's not the same game. As a matter of fact, a lot of artists, I recommend that they flesh out some ideas on Logic at their own home. Flesh out some ideas. Bring me a solid arrangement. It'll actually turn out better in the end when we set your band up in the room. Y'all will have a little more experience, a little more knowledge about what we're about to do to make this song. It's different, but there's a lot of we do a lot of mixes there, mastering, and if you do have a real band and you want to record like a real band, you can't do that in your basement studio. You can start some tracks, you can multi-track, you can stack some ideas on top of each other. But if you want to really sound like a band, you have to be in a studio that has ISO rooms, has a big room. Let's put 13 mics around the drum set and let's make it sound big and real. It's still needed, but yeah, it's a different game. It's a different game, man. As a matter of fact, I was gonna tell you. Let me backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm sure you remember this era in kind of phased out mid-90s, but all through the 80s, my dad would do a lot of once a month, he would do a singer-songwriter special. So he would have all his whoever was going to be in the band. Sloan Hayes was usually on piano, being the band leader, drummer, guitarist, bassist, and a singer-songwriter walk in there with stuff he had recorded on a cassette, sometimes even a mini cassette that you held in your hand. And those singer-songwriters, that's the only way they had to present their songs in some type of real form, was to get a band behind them in a studio. So you were asking if my dad ever got me in there. So it was one Saturday afternoon, the drummer, for some reason, didn't show up. It was the 80s. It was probably because he stayed up too late on Friday. I don't know. Maybe he was still up on Saturday morning and just didn't go to the studio. But the singer-songwriter was there, and my dad calls me at home, and I'm 13, and he says, come down to the studio. I'm going to see if you can do this drum track for us. I've got a singer-songwriter here who we don't have the drummer. He's not going to be here. So I'm going to, bike on down here. I biked on down with my yellow bike with the banana seat.
Yeah.
And
Stingray with the high hand. Yeah.
It has some high handlebars. That's the one. And piano and drum set were my first instruments. So I was in there, and my dad told the guy, look, if my son, he's my son, I get it. There's nepotism going on here, but if my son can't save the day, no problem. The musicians are on me. We'll reschedule another day. We'll get you in here to do your demos. And I remember, I don't remember if it was the first take or the second take we're running through. And I can see in the engineer's room, I see the singer-songwriter going, we're good. And so that would have been technically my first time recording in the studio.
Tell me about that bike ride. I don't know how far you lived from the studio, but close enough you could ride your bike. What was going through your mind? Fear, excitement, or what?
At 13, you didn't know. I was just like, oh, I'm recording a drum track, no problem. I mean, I don't even think I overanalyzed it too much. There was no pressure. It was a no pressure thing. I didn't have to, he didn't tell me I was on the hook to save the day, and so we could have food that week or whatever. It wasn't that bad, but I just remember going in there thinking, okay. And I knew the guys in the band because they were my dad's, workmates, bandmates, and all that other stuff. So just went in there and played some simple backbeat for a simple songwriter demo.
What do you want to do with the studio now going forward?
Yeah, I think exactly. So the model's changed a little bit. So what I want to do, what I'm passionate about in the studio, is producing other folks. So that gets to be the vehicle and the place where I don't mind going on location and producing anybody anywhere, but the studio's on point. And so I'm doing with the production company, I'm doing a lot of productions out of there as well. So with the production company, it's more of a partnership. I'm not necessarily trying to make money off some kind of hourly rental. That's kind of the idea, is not to just have a studio that people want to go record at and you book time. It's really more of a production house and a studio. Some people do call that want to just come in there and record as a band, and they have their own producer and engineer, but it's the hub for the production company. Real people music, and the studio is reel to reel studios.
How do you balance that with your other gig with Collective Soul?
You got to have good partners at home. That Brian Collins is my partner in the production company, a well-established singer-songwriter in his own right. Jonathan Beckner, my head engineer, has been there for 20 years. So I've got a good circle of guys who keep the studio going, and I don't mind taking phone calls on the road. I'll talk to anybody. Somebody wants to call and talk about a project. I get it done on the road, man. Just like, hey, I'm on the road right now talking to you.
That's right. I feel special. Okay, you mentioned earlier, you said, okay, we did this record. Yeah, okay, but what's next? Does vibrating still feel new to you? I mean, it's been out like a full year, so you've got to be, something's got to be percolating for a follow-up or a next record.
There is, and we're super proud of Vibrating.
I love it.
Thank you. Yes, matter of fact, we recorded in January in Palm Springs. We had a friend of a friend who bought Elvis's Palm Springs house in probably a little over a decade ago. He's had it for a while, and he left it just like Elvis had it. It was semi-functional. It was in a lot of disrepair. Not all the bathrooms were even working. But as soon as we knew somebody who had Elvis's Palm Springs house, our idea was always, well, how can we get in there and record music in Elvis's house? So the whole month of January, we were there at Elvis's place in Palm Springs. We set up in his main little living room, looking right into the pool. The same room he recorded some tunes on the Raised on Rock record. RCA had put up some, just acoustic tiles in the ceiling, and he sang vocals in there. But it's the big main room. We bought in some furniture, staged it a little bit, brought in a piano and all our gear, and came out with some amazing music again. I feel like we did it again. I tell everybody we always create by feel, and you kind of know when it's right. It's just a feeling inside. Sometimes, most of the time, my hairs just stand straight up when I know it's right.
Tell me everything you can tell me about the new record.
Well,
do you have a title? When is it coming out? Are you going to?
Hey, wait, you're leading this interview real well. You're right. I do know the title. The title is going to be "Here to Eternity." Kind of a little bit of throwback to the Palm Springs, era, which is still all there in the architecture and the vibe in Palm Springs. But "Here to Eternity," the famous Burt Lancaster film, the Airbnb that we stayed in was Burt Lancaster's old home, also one of his old homes. He had two homes in Palm Springs. So we just thought "Here to Eternity" made a lot of sense. It's also coming out the same year, next year. It'll come out next year. It's also coming out the same year as our quintessential documentary and our 30-year anniversary. So "Here to Eternity," it's got a lot of double entendre, triple entendre. It's got a lot of depth there. So the record will be called "From Here to Eternity." You will see the quintessential Collective Soul documentary. You'll understand a little bit more about how much of a small town story it is. And it's going to be hopefully a real exciting, fun year for us.
The word "from" is in there, right? From here to eternity, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Boy, that's great. And I'm gonna throw it out right now. You and I need to do a follow-up interview next year after I get a chance to see the documentary and talk about it. And we'll time it just so it's right when it's coming out. That is very exciting. I didn't even know about that. Pencil
it in, man. The record will probably be out in April, and I bet the documentary's out middle summer, maybe late summer.
Okay, great. You got me excited. Hey, give me just a brief rundown of your bass gear, basses, amps, strings, effects. People like to know what you're playing.
Yeah. Strings, man, that goes way back to my dad too, man. I mean, that Ernie Ball Eagle, that's all he played. And I always thought the logo was the coolest anyway when I was a kid growing up. And I've got a great relationship with Music Man Ernie Ball now. Derek Brooks out there is taking care of me now for over 20 years. I play their bongo bass live. When it was new, he wanted me to get some other players out there playing it on stage, and I got it. And he gave me a couple, and I was like, it's a different looking bass. I don't know if I can adapt to this. And it didn't take me long to adapt to it and feel very comfortable behind that bass. It plays very even up the neck. It's an absolute road warrior. What I mean by that is I literally, over 20 years, and I've got a lot of bongo basses now because he's made some custom ones, custom colors and such, but I've never had any issue. And no matter what, man, when I put that thing in the box in tune, or in the case in tune, I'll pick it up the next morning. It's in tune. It's in tune up the neck. It plays even.
That's incredible.
So it's just a really good bass. I love playing live.
When you said bongo bass, the first place my mind went was Dave LaRue. You know Dave?
No.
The Dixie Dregs.
Yeah.
They're from your part of the country.
Yeah.
Florida, Georgia, that area.
Jonathan Mover, Steve Morris. Yeah.
So any special effects or amps or anything like that you use?
Yeah, I used to do a big Boss effects pedal. I have a chorus that I like to use, and I have I like the Ampeg DI. The Ampeg DI that has the it's got some of the typical notch points that Ampeg has. It's also got that SCR, basically their fuzz on the DI. So, and that's a really cool bass distortion. So that's on the DI. I send live. I stopped miking up my bass rig about 20 years ago, probably. I was like, yeah, that's not really, don't really need that. So I get one DI signal post all of pedals. So if I hit a distortion, if I hit the chorus on World I Know or Compliment, I put the chorus on Compliment. Then one of my signals gets that, and then the other signal is a straight DI signal, just that bass, clean as it can be. So that's pretty much what I do. And of course, the Ampeg rigs are behind me, and they are on. I feel them, but Johnny can feel them, but they're not mic'd up. They're not mic'd up, but they're on. And if you're in the front of the house, you're getting a little bit of the real bass sound from the bass rig. Yeah, because there's two of them. There's 16 10-inch speakers back there.
I want to ask you about playing bass. This is for bass players only. And this is for bassplayersonly.com is really an instruction site. Yeah, I have an interview every week and a blog every week, but I've also got people from all over the world coming every day to learn how to play bass. And it's mostly adults. And by adults, I mean most of the people that come to me to learn bass are in their 50s, 60s, 70s. And there's a membership and there's some digital courses. So they're not setting out to be professional musicians. They want to play some classic rock riffs with their buddies or some blues shuffles, or funk R&B, maybe a little walking bass. So I tell you that to give you a context. With that in mind, what advice do you have for somebody like that who wants to learn to play bass? What do you think they should be thinking about? What do you think is important for them to know?
It's hard to, I'm not sure that this will make sense for a lot of people who are just trying to start, but use your ears and your feel more than you focus on your hand. Let it come into you first and then figure out what you want it to sound like. Because music ultimately, it boils down to emotion. It's not a, hey, count this rhythm and hit this fret at this time and then hit this fret at this time. And then you've made some inspiring music. It doesn't really work like that. It's not a mechanical thing. It's a spiritual, emotional, moving enigma that's kind of out there. When it's right, people can tap into that. And when it's right, it transcends all, it's been said before, it's a universal language. People can feel those things. So that's what I would say is like, you got to start out knowing third fret is the G, and then we're going to go straight up here to the fifth fret on the A, and we're on D. Or, here's the Tom Sawyer riff. But eventually, if you want to evolve and be a musician, it's not about those technical things. It's about creating feel and emotion that connects to the human experience.
I'm really glad I asked. That is a very good perspective to keep in mind. Because not like the chops crazy, back in the 80s, remember every
yeah. And I can't do that. And I respect Billy Sheehan and I respect all those other guys that can do that. But
me too.
And I've got some technique, but again, how we grew up, we service the song, and the song is what carries the day. And so, yeah, that's kind of the way I think about it.
Anything else coming up for you outside of the studio and outside Collective Soul? Maybe another solo project?
Yeah, I definitely got to do another one. I've got some really good songs in mind. So I think in the fall, I'm going to dig in, and I'd like to do another complete record. That sounds pretty aggressive though, because I am pretty busy. So if it turns into an EP, that's fine too. But I'll get at least 4 or 5 tunes out, and I'd like to go for a record, but we'll see.
All right. Well, we'll talk about that in our follow-up interview.
Yeah, man. Go ahead and pencil that in, man.
I'll say
when that documentary release happens, we'll pencil that in.
And then I'll ask you about the record or the EP. I'll say, well, so did you get it done? Did you get it done? What are you going to say?
I'll probably say no, but it's closer. It's closer than when I talked to you last.
Well, it's not like you're just sitting around. Hey,
no, I'm trying to do it all, man.
What would you be if you were not a bass player? Something outside of music.
Hmm. Uh, I used to like TV shows that featured a private investigator, and
I did too.
and when I was a kid, I used to think if I wasn't a musician, I'd be a PI. So there you go. There's my answer.
Did you watch Rockford?
Rockford. I liked. I remember like in Remington Steele and yeah,
Okay.
private investigator. Will Turpin, PI. I don't know if that works, but
Yeah, it works. I'm a little older than you. I also used to watch Mannix.
I know that. I know that. I know that. I know that name.
I'm the youngest of the kids. So there was a time when I was old enough to stay home alone on a Saturday night, but not really old enough to go out like my brother and my sisters. My parents would go out. So, I used to, marry Tyler Moore and Bob Newhart. And then Mannix came on.
Nice.
But Rockford, I watched that too in the 80s. And he answers the phone and the guy says, meet me under the bridge at midnight. Come alone. He says, where do you get that stuff? And the movie, meet you at the sandcastle in 10 minutes. That was Rockford. All right, we're getting off track here, but yeah, I always like those detective shows too. But I like music, and I like bass, and I like Collective Soul, and I like the other stuff that you've done. And I used to get so excited about recording studios. So I admire a lot of the stuff that you've been doing and that you are doing and that you're going to do.
Check us out on Facebook. It's Reel to Reel Studios. You'll see it. Give us a little follow. We put some interesting stuff up, and you'll see. There's a good post where we moved the Trident out, and luckily a good friend who's an analog aficionado bought it, and it's in a good home. So and he bought the switch machine as well. So
that makes you feel better.
That does make me feel better. He was a friend of my father's, and he recorded on that machine as well at Reel to Reel.
That's great. Well, it is in good hands. Well, congratulations on all your success. It's not every day you see a band who's been together for 30 years successfully. So I'm so excited about this documentary. I can't wait for it. And maybe next time I'm down in the Georgia area, I'll peek in and take a look at your studio.
I'll be upset if I find out you didn't contact me.
It sounds good.
I love showing people the place because of the legacy and the pride that we have. That was our base, and that was, my dad built that place from the ground up. So
that's great. And obviously you're very proud of him as well.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining me today, Will. Really appreciate it. You all are watching ForBassPlayersOnly.com. I am John Liebman, founder and first baseman. A lot of people think they're too old or it's too late for them to learn how to play an instrument. So I created ForBassPlayersOnly.com for adults who want to learn to play bass, because I believe you're never too old and it's never too late to groove, to experience the joy and the pleasure of making music. ForBassPlayersOnly.com. Thanks again to my special guest, Will Turpin. I will see you all next week, same time, same place. In the meantime, let's play bass.